To the left is John's Uncle George's grave, and then ahead of us is the area where the church fete took place in 1957.
Graham Paisley is used to showing people around the site of St. Peter's Church in Woolton, South Liverpool. As verger and administrator, he talks to visitors regularly about its history and, in particular, its connection with the story of the Beatles.
Turning round and facing towards the hall, we see in the distance the grave of Eleanor Rigby. Obviously a very important monument and one of the most visited headstones in this churchyard. In the distance is the church hall, and it was that short distance that John walked from the field with the Quarrymen in 1957 to the hall.
It was inside that church hall on the 6th of July 1957 that John Lennon met Paul McCartney for the first time. John, with his band the Quarrymen, had been playing as part of the day's events.
The fete that was held in 1957 was in Woolton calendar, one of the big events of the year. Woolton was very much a village at that time. The summer fair in the church was a big event. The dance in the evening was probably the only one held during the year, and as such was a big function.
Rod Davis was also there on that day as one of the members of the Quarrymen, which in 1957 was very much a skiffle group.
We would have a tea-chest bass, and at the time John met Paul, the bass player was by then Len Gary. Len had replaced the earlier guy, so Len was on tea-chest bass. John obviously was on his guitar, Eric had his guitar, and then we also had Colin Hanton, the drummer, Pete Shotton with his washboard, and me with my banjo.
More than half a century later, Rod was looking through a collection of photograph negatives taken by his father, James Lewis Davis. Among them were images taken on July the 6th, 1957, of the Rose Queen procession and the fete. Among the spectators on that day was Rod's younger brother, Bernard.
My father used to always have a camera with him, and he was always taking photographs, and he took lots and lots and lots of photographs, and he always kept the negatives. When he died, we had several quite big cardboard boxes of negatives, and if you think about 35mm film, this is thousands of pictures.
The images provide fascinating insight into part of the history of St. Peter's Church. They show the Rose Queen procession, led by the band of the Cheshire Yeomanry, followed by local scouts, brownies and guides, and the Rose Queen herself. But also hidden away were some pictures of the Quarrymen sitting on the back of a haulage lorry as part of the procession. Bernard says it was a find they never thought they'd make.
For some reason, we never were able to find a photograph or a negative of a picture of the Quarrymen. I don't think my dad really approved terribly much, really, to be honest. He did drive them round to various bookings they had, but he wasn't very impressed with John. I remember one time he took them to the Locarno. Was it Carol Levis? I think it was Carol Levis on one of these shows. And my dad was a bit disgusted because John stubbed a cigarette out on the carpet, which of course was typical Lennon, being rebellious and so on. Anyway, as I say, we never had any photographs of the band, and I don't think my dad even thought he had any photographs of the band. So eventually Rod went through all these negatives I don't know if he's got through them all yet, but he phoned me up one day and said, I've actually found some of the band.
Rod says, as typical teenagers, the Quarrymen liked being able to push the boundaries a bit with skiffle music.
We just pinched everything from Lonnie Donegan and anybody else that sang anything skiffly. Maggie May, we particularly liked Maggie May because it dealt with a dubious lady and was quite nice singing that in in St. Peter's church youth club, you know.
But sometimes John Lennon liked to push the boundaries a little further. The pictures found by Rod include an image of the then rector of St. Peter's, the Reverend Maurice Pryce-Jones. Rod remembers that sometimes Mr. Pryce-Jones became the subject of John Lennon's habit of changing the words of songs.
Putting on the style, one of the verses goes, preacher in the pulpit roars with all his might, shouting glory, hallelujah, and puts the folks to fright. Now you might think it's Satan that's coming down the aisle, and John used to sing, but it's only Mr. Pryce-Jones putting on his style. Now significantly enough, in the presence of Mr. Pryce-Jones, John didn't actually do that. He sang, it's only our poor preacher man putting on his style. He didn't push his luck and say Mr. Pryce-Jones.
Colin, can you hear me? Oh, 1, 2, 1, 2.
In March 2010, St. Peter's Church Hall once again resounded to the music of the Quarrymen for a party that was taking place there. From the lineup that played on the 6th of July 1957 were Rod Davis, Len Garry and Colin Hanton. John Duff Lowe was also in the 2010 lineup on keyboards. He played piano with the Quarrymen for 2 years from 1958. Colin Hanton says although the day John Lennon met Paul McCartney in 1957 is now seen as a significant milestone in pop music history, at the time it was a pretty unremarkable occasion.
Some lad that we didn't know met somebody that we did know. I mean, that was just it. There was no thunderclap. It was just being introduced to another young man.
But playing music again in St. Peter's Church Hall did bring back memories for Colin of Quarrymen band practices.
Most of the rehearsals were done in Paul's house or in the early days in Mum's house, you know, in Hayescroft Road there. Obviously we went up to John's house and met Aunt Mimi, and sometimes we'd just go and sit and talk with Aunt Mimi in the back room. Other occasions we'd set up my little drum kit, which amazed me that Aunt Mimi allowed us to do that. We just rehearsed in the front room. She was a very stern kind of lady, somebody that I used to describe as a cross between a librarian and a headmistress. But she was the first adult that actually spoke to us as adults, you know, not sort of down to us as kids. She would sit and hold a conversation with you and make you cups of tea.
Colin says the church and its surrounding area provided John Lennon with quite a posh setting for his formative years.
It was an upmarket village, Woolton, very much separated from Liverpool. I mean, the boundaries have stretched now. I mean, the houses have been built on all the open spaces. So in Woolton, John spoke well. And whenever we got into trouble, I never saw him fight, and he used to just talk his way out of it, you know, and he'd just talk until the aggressive sort of either got so fed up, he just went, you know, everybody just went home.
John's Aunt Mimi was a regular member of St. Peter's congregation. Graham Paisley says the church is also central to a number of places that play a part in the Beatles' influences and story.
Mimi was a regular attender at church. From accounts of people who knew her in those days, she had a regular pew, sat in the same place near to the back of the church. It's very much central to a number of memorable Beatles sites, the Strawberry Fields. The school where John went to, senior school, Quarrybank, is not so far away. And then just a couple of miles from St. Peter's is Paul McCartney's house. So there are a number of places that figure largely in the Beatles music and the history of the Beatles.
We finished this visit to St. Peter's Church where we started, in the graveyard. Among the tombstones of Eleanor Rigby and John Lennon's Uncle George lies the resting place of Graham Paisley's father, who also happens to be another Liverpool legend.
My father was Bob Paisley, the Liverpool manager from 1974 to 1983. won a number of league championships, European Cups. Liverpool is a city very much associated with music and football, and in a kind of funny way, in our churchyard, they're both linked together with prominent people in both fields of music and football resting in the churchyard. You're always aware of the Beatles music, particularly from my football background. When you used to go to football matches in the 60s, it's where the cops started singing songs, and they were invariably Beatles songs. It was a special time in a city that was quite run down. It was basically whatever they would put on over the tannoy. Particularly remembered She Loves You was sung with real vigour, full gusto.